How many times have you sat down to watch a film and you've gone to Netflix and you've put the name of the film in the little search bar and it goes, "Oh, do you mean this film?" And you go, "Yep, that's the one." You click it and they go, "Oh, we've not got it." So you think, "Right." And you go over to Disney Plus and you search it there and they go, "Oh, you mean this film?" And you go, "Yep." And they go, "We've not got it." So you try Amazon and they go, "Well, we've got it, but it's going to cost you even more on top of the subscription that you already pay us." If that's you and you're sick to the back teeth of all these streaming services nickeling and diming you, so you're paying more for worse services, here is a guide on how to build your own Netflix with blackjack and hookers. So here's a quick look at my movies currently. And if I go to the top, I also have my shows. So this all runs on my server locally. Okay, so just before we get started, I just want to clarify, this is a guide for absolute beginners. So some of the stuff I'm going to talk about might seem overwhelming. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to drop them in the comments. I always try and reply to as many as I can and help people out where they might struggle. I also want to stress that the scenario we're covering today is basically you can get a movie, you can download a movie or a TV show using an automated system. You can then host it and then you can watch that movie on your smart TV or your game console, your phone, whatever it might be. However, we'll only be covering your local network today, so you won't be able to access them when you're not on your own Wi-Fi network. I will be covering more in-depth stuff in the coming months, but for now, this is your absolute 101 beginner's guide. So let's get started. So the two main download methods for these applications is torrents and Usenet. Now, you might be familiar with torrents. If you are not, basically torrents are, you all have the files and someone, "Oh, I want that file. I'm going to get a bit from you, a bit from you, a bit from you." But what happens if nobody has the full file? You can't get it. And also there's download speed fluctuations. There's obviously some ISPs who block things like that. It's very insecure and not my preferred method. I prefer Usenet. Now, Usenet is essentially kind of like an alternate reality internet is probably the best way I could describe it. So unfortunately, you are going to need to pay some money for a Usenet provider. You can usually find them quite cheap online. They're usually around $5 to $10 a month, but trust me, they are well worth it. It's much cheaper than paying $60, $70 on Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO Max, whatever streaming services you have. The cost pales in comparison. So Usenet has an absolute plethora of files on its servers, so we need to pay a Usenet server to get access to it, and then we need an indexer to scan those files and get the ones we want. A little bit like a search engine, almost, in a very basic nutshell. I don't want to go too much into the technical details because it's kind of mind-boggling, even for someone who's been doing this for years, such as myself. So for Usenet providers, this is one of the ones I use. This is Usenet Server. I've used them for probably almost 10 years at this point. Very reliable, quite cheap. So all you need to do is, they do offer a 1-month plan at $15. However, if you buy an annual subscription, it's currently on sale for $6 a month. So that takes your total just to $90 for the whole year. I tend to pay annually. However, I recommend if you're new to this, then get a 1-month plan, see how you get on with it. If you don't want to renew or you find a better provider, that's absolutely fine. Or if you think, hang on, this is absolutely brilliant, then I recommend advising that you go for a annual deal because you'd save an absolute ton of money. And I assure you that if this hooks you, you'll get your money's worth very, very quickly. So one thing to note when you're looking into Usenet providers, if I just have a look here, so you want things like a good article retention. So that's basically the files that are stored on the Usenet server. How long are they retained for? In this case, 6,480 days, which off the top of my head is 20 years-ish. I'm not sure exactly. You also have the amount of connections. So you can see on the monthly, you only get 30 SSL server connections. And on the annual deal, you get 60. That just affects things like your download speed. Although in my experience, the download speeds tend to be pretty good anyway, so not a major thing. So this is my recommended one. This is the one I'll be using for the purposes of this video. Entirely up to you which one you go for. At the heart of them, they all work the same. So once you've got your server registration, they'll send you, you'll have your username, your password. They might send you what the actual hosting link is, which we'll cover shortly as well. You're also going to need an indexer. So this is basically what the apps will use as a kind of search engine to grab the files that we need. So I can't specifically tell you which one to use or show you specific ones. However, what I will say is if you go to the r/Usenet subreddit, this is a great resource. There's all sorts of information on here. Some of them will open up for registrations during a certain period. Some of them do offer free accounts. However, those are usually limited. So they might say, oh, you can only download a couple of films a day or a couple of files a day. So have a look at this. Keep an eye out for invitations and things like that. And the one thing you're looking for is API usage. So you're going to need something that has API keys. I'll explain what they are later on in this video. So once you've got that, let's get some apps downloaded. So now you've got your Usenet server account and your indexes, you're going to need a newsreader. So this is essentially an app that will use your indexes to fetch the files off the servers themselves. It's your downloader, essentially. So for this, I'll be using SABnzbd. It's one I've used for, again, probably around 10 years at this point. There's also others. There's nzbget, which I've also used a little bit, which is fine. They do the same things, essentially. So whichever your preferred one of choice is, but I advise if you're brand new to this, use SABnzbd because, in my opinion, it's probably the easiest to set up. So all you need to do is download this on your Windows, Mac, Linux, whatever you're using. So we'll just do the usual install. You can run it at startup if you like, which I do recommend, just so it's on. So we'll run it. So what it's going to do is when it runs, it will open up a setup wizard. So what we're going to do is select your language. This is where you're going to input your server details. So in the case of mine, the link is news.usenetserver.com. And then I'm going to enter my username and password. So I've entered my username and password, and I've gone to the next screen. So this here is going to tell you want to bookmark this link. So we're going to do that. We're just going to bookmark the link just so we can easily access it. I'm just going to call it SAB for short. So it's up here on my bookmarks. So by default, it will create a complete and incomplete folder in your downloads folder. You can change these if you like. I'm just going to leave them as the defaults just for ease. So this is SAB, and quite basic. Obviously nothing there at the moment. We've got our queue at the top and our history at the bottom, which will just be populated with the files when we come to download them. You can manually add an NZB file here by either grabbing it from a URL, uploading the file, but we're not going to bother with any of that. We're going to automate it, so we don't have to, you'll barely have to touch this once it's all set up. So firstly, we've got this little wrench here, which just has mainly some interface options. So you can set the web interface. So if you want I like using the tabbed layout, which moves the tabs up here. So you've got your queue, your history, then any warnings if any files fail or they can't be unzipped for if they're encrypted or something. So now we have the proper config. So firstly, and most importantly, we're going to come to general. This is where at the top we've got our host and our port. So this is basically if you look at the link at the top, it will match. So if you want to change it and say, oh, I'd rather you listen on 8081, then you can change that, save it, restart, and then the link you need to go to will need to be 8081. But there's no real reason to change any of that, just an FYI. Next up, and most importantly, you can set a username and password, which I advise you do. I won't be doing it for the purposes of this tutorial, but you can. So this basically means that whenever you have an app that accesses SAB, you need to provide that username and password. It just adds a little bit of extra security. But the most important security aspect of this is this here. This is our API key. So This is essentially a password that will allow apps to communicate with each other. So do not share these. Don't tell your friends. These, I'm not, usually I blur them, but because this isn't my main server, this is just a Windows setup, it won't, I'll be removing all this once I've finished this tutorial anyway. So nice try. Get your own. So you don't really need to worry about the NZB key, but the API key, you'll want to make a note of that. Next up, folders. You can customize your downloads folders. You can have your watched folders. So you can, if you download a manual NZB file off an indexer, for example, you can either add it to SAB manually, or you can drop it into a watch folder and it will automatically grab it and start downloading it. Now for servers, so that's the server we had a moment ago, but if we go to show details, the connections here, by default it's 8, but I know that the package I have has, I think, 55, so I'll just change that to 55, just so I get the most connections. I'm paying for them, I'm going to use them. Next up, we have categories. So you need to have categories here, so when apps talk to each other, by default, they won't really do much, but what you need to be aware of is apps need them. And basically, you can set custom folder paths. So if you wanted a subfolder, for example, so you'd have downloads completed movies, downloads completed TV, you can add extra paths in here. I'm not going to bother with that because the apps we'll be installing later will handle all that for us. Next, we have switches, which is just some kind of preferences. So things I like to enable here are direct unpack, which basically, as it's downloading the files, it will start unpacking them. It can save a little bit of time. If you've got a very, very low powered machine, I wouldn't recommend it. You can also do things like if you pause during the post-processing. So if you've downloaded 10 movies and one's downloaded, it will pause the downloads for the rest, unpack that movie, move it over, and then it'll carry on. So if you're on a very low-powered device, then I advise doing that. But for the most part, if you're using this on your PC or an old laptop, for the most part, you should be fine. Next, we have sorting. So do make sure that when you change any of the settings, you click save, otherwise it'll shout to you like it just did to me. Next up, we had sorting. This is where you can do it. If you wanted to just handle this all manually, you could. So like there, you've got some quick starts for moving and renaming all TV shows or movies. That's where the categories come into play. I'm not going to be doing this. I'm going to be using a separate app for this later, which is much easier. Notifications, if you want to send Windows notifications for jobs failing, things like that, you can do so there. Or if you use things like Pushbullet or third-party notification agents, you can do all that there. Scheduling, you can add different tasks. If you wanted it to only download between certain hours, for example, you could say, right, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, between the hours of, 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., you can do all the downloading, but any other time, don't download. RSS, this is for feed URLs. I don't really use these. And then here is some special options where just for the very advanced users, but you don't really need to use these. So this is SAB. So next up, we're going to get a couple of apps that will actually connect to SAB so we can download our movies and TV shows. Okay, so first up, we have Radarr. Now, the other app we're going to be using is Sonarr. They're essentially the same app. The only difference is Radarr is for movies and Sonarr is for TV shows. The UIs are almost identical. The setup configuration is going to be almost identical. It's just two separate apps. So firstly, we'll do Radarr. So let's download Radarr. So you can just use the normal 64-bit installer or whichever system you're on. I do currently run my installation of these on Docker on my NAS server. So in later videos, I'll be covering that more advanced setup where we have more control and more automations. But for now, we'll just do the very, very basic setup for you guys out there who are brand new to this. So I'm going to create a desktop shortcut. I'm also going to install it as a Windows service just to keep it running when it needs to. Because all these apps, they're essentially, we're going to access them through the browser like we did with SAB. So we're going to go to our local host and different port numbers. So the way that works is essentially your local device host is 127.0.0.1. That tells the computer, look inside yourself. And you imagine inside yourself is a massive street, and your ports are just different houses. So all you need to do is pop in the correct address in a very tortured analogy. So we're going to open the UI. So I'll just close off that main tab now. I'll drag that back there. So you can see at the top, we've got localhost or 127.0.0.1. Localhost means the exact same thing, so either or will work. And then our port there, the default Radarr port, 7878. So again, I advise just popping a little bookmarks toolbar on your toolbar. So it will ask you to do an authentication method. So you can do a forms login page. So what will happen is when you open this up, it'll say, whoa, 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 give me a username and password. So you can enable the authentication or you can disable for local addresses. So this is for if you're like me and you run it where you can access this from outside your local network. This means that if I'm on the local network, it's not going to ask me for a password. If I'm accessing it remotely, it will go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Username and password, please. So I always disable it for local addresses. But for username, put whatever you want. And then password, put whatever you want. So there we are. So welcome to Radarr. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to set up our connection to our downloader. So if you come to system, you notice this big, ugly 3. So it's basically telling us there's some problems, which we know because we've not even looked at it yet. So we've got no indexes with RSS sync available, we've got no download client, and we've got no indexes available with automatic search because we don't have a download client and we don't have any indexes yet. So we need to provide some. So we're going to go to settings, and the first thing we're going to do is come to download clients. Now our download client, SAB, which we've just configured, we're going to press this little plus button. There's already a little button there for it. If you're using any of these, like Download Station, you might get NZB, or if you're using torrents, then there's all the options there. So I'm just going to use SAB. So by default, it will say localhost on port 8080. Obviously, if you've manually told it to be on a different port, do make sure you update it. Now, we're going to want that API key. So I'm going to head back over to SAB. I'm going to go to config, general. I'm going to grab that API key here. I'm going to copy. I'm going to paste. And then we need to make sure, obviously, if you've added a username and password, you can add those in there as well. And now categories, by default, it'll point to movies. There is a movie category by default in SAB, so you can just leave that as is. Priorities, you can just leave as is. I don't really use tagging for this because it's not relevant. And then you want to enable completed download handling. So remove completed and remove failed. Because what will happen if you don't is if you download a ton of movies like I do, you'll have hundreds and hundreds of entries here, even though they've all imported fine. So it just helps keep the queue a little bit cleaner. So make sure those are enabled. We're going to hit test, and we should see a lovely green tick. There we are. If it doesn't have a green tick, it will normally say, oh, it couldn't connect. So either SAB's, you've not turned it on, or you've not pointed it at the right port, or you've not given it the right API key. It will tell you what the issue is. So just do what it tells you. And if you do what it tells you and it still doesn't work, pop a comment below. We'll try and figure it out together. So now that's done, we're going to save that. So now we're going to need to add an indexer. So like I mentioned earlier, I have several indexers that I pay annually for. I usually pay about $15, $20 a year for access to them. So I can't show too much, but I will explain how they work. So in these presets, you'll see that there's some listed here. So you can just use your imagination. So I'm going to pick a random one. And then when I pick a random one, again, it's going to ask for an API key. So I'm going to go away, I'm going to add my indexes, and that will let me use them. Okay, so I've added my indexer. So for all indexers, you need to make sure that you get your API key. So usually if you go to your profile or settings, there'll be an option there for API key. It all depends on which one you sign up for. So now that's done, we're going to go to set up some media management. So we need to basically tell it where our movies and TV are going to be stored on our system. So I'm just going to go to my C drive. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this one media. And in there, I'm going to make a movies folder and a TV folder. If you've already got movies and TV shows on your system, drag and drop them into here. For movies, I believe you can have them just as raw files. So if you've got all your movies that aren't in subfolders, you can just drop them in. For TV shows, you want to have them named quite specifically. So you have the name of the show, and then inside that you can have the seasons, and you need to make sure the episodes are named accordingly. The apps we're using will do all that for us, but if you've already got some media, then do make sure you've prepped it properly. So this is going to be our root folder, this movies folder. So I'll just pop that out of the way for now. So I'm going to come down to root folders. I'm going to press add a root folder. Go to my C drive, go to media, and then go to movies, or wherever you've decided to keep. If you've got an external hard drive, for example, or just a separate hard drive or a partition, point it wherever is necessary. So next, we're going to look at renaming the movies. So I like to have my movies quite neat. So I always leave smart replace on and replace illegal characters. So if you get things, I can't remember what type, like slash certain characters that can cause filing issues, it will automatically just remove them and keep them tidy. I think slashes and things like that can cause issues. Now, in this standard movie format, I just like having the default, which is the movie, the year it came out, and then the quality in the format. If you press this little question mark, it gives you all the different naming tags that you can use. And if you have this little bit at the bottom, so if you decide, oh, I want the movie, the IMDb ID, you can just click into this little bit at the bottom and you can populate it however you wish. But I'm just going to leave it as the default for now. Personally, I think the default's fine. So you also, or this is a personal preference, you have this option here to unmonitor deleted movies. So basically, the way these apps work is you're going to add some movies. And say if you had a movie that's not yet out, or it's just been announced, it's going to scan periodically and keep looking for that movie. It's monitoring the movie. If you watch that movie and it's rubbish and you delete it, if you tick this, it's going to stop monitoring that movie. So it's going to go, right, he's not monitoring anymore. It will still be in the list, but we're not going to monitor it. It won't re-download it. If you leave this unticked and you go, that movie was rubbish, I don't want to ever see that again in my life, you're going to delete it and it's going to go, oh, he still wants this movie. We'll download it again. So I always suggest unmonitoring your deleted movies. So once you've done all that, click Save Changes. Next up, we're going to look at profiles and quality. Now, this all depends on personal preference. So, for example, I have a network-attached server downstairs, which I have 30-ish terabytes. So I've got quite a good amount of space to play with. So if I want some movies in 4K, my favourite films, then I can do that. But I advise to start with, if you just use this any profile as a starting point, you can see in here, this is what a profile looks like. So on your right hand side, you've got all the different formats that will work for this profile. So I don't want work prints, I don't want cam copies, telesyncs, telescenes, regionals, DVD screeners. I don't want standard definition. I don't want DVD-Rs. You might want DVD, especially for a lot of older, hard to come by films. Most of these, I don't want a full Blu-ray disc because that will eat through storage. And on the PC, I don't really need 4K, so I'm just going to download these 2160p ones. But I'll get rid of the Remux as well. But we'll leave those as optional. You can name the quality profile up here. You can allow upgrades. So basically, if it downloads a movie and it gets a DVD copy, for example, and then they come out with a Blu-ray remaster, if you've enabled that, when it checks for new movies, not only is it going to check for new films that you haven't got, it's going to go, of the ones he's enabled, have I got a 1080p copy? Is there a 720p copy I can get? So if you want to basically get the best quality media, then you can allow upgrades. Personally, I like allowing upgrades, and then what it'll do is it'll give you basically the threshold. So if you want to say, right, give me full 1080p, don't stop until you get it, it will keep scanning those until it gets to them. If you're happy with, say, 720p, it'll go, right, we found a 1080p copy, he only wanted a 720p copy, we're going to get that one, and now he's happy, we're going to stop searching. Also for language, I always leave this on original, because I watch some foreign films occasionally. I can't stand dubs, so I always leave that on original. Subs over dubs every time. Anyone who tells you otherwise, don't trust them. Obviously, totally down to personal preference for you. So we're going to hit save. So this is our profiles. Obviously, there are some already. So when you add a movie, it's going to say, what profile do you want to use? I just default to this any profile. If you want to play around and have more granular control, like I said, I have separate profiles on my server where I have my favorite movies that I want at 4K, best bitrate, look great on the big telly, or if I want some movies that someone might have recommended, not too fussed about it, I might, just give me any copy, not really fussed. If you want further control over this, if you come into here and go to quality, you can see all the profiles have a built-in quality. So if you've got, for example, a 1080p Blu-ray, it will download the file, whatever it finds, which might be massive. It could be 50, 60 gigabytes and eat through your storage and take years to download. If you want a little bit more granular control, you can drag these sliders. The middle, there's two sliders. You've got this middle number here, which is your preferred size. You've also got this slider here, which is your absolute maximum. So if it finds a file, if you've set it to, say, 75 gig, and it finds a file that's 80 gig, it will not download it. It'll say, nope, too big, you've not asked for it. So you can have a play around with these. You can also, if you come up here to show advanced, you can specify the actual bit rate per minute or the megabytes per minute of that. So if you go, oh, I only want 100 meg per minute max, and or preferred, and then 125 meg per minute maximum. So you can see there, 5.9 gig an hour preferred, 7.3 gig an hour max, which I think's fine. I think 15, 20 gig a movie is more than enough for most people. Obviously, if you're very space efficient, you can really tinker with this. I will be covering these types of things in more depth in future videos, but have a play around, get comfortable, and go from there. So the eagle-eyed viewers amongst you might have noticed that I still had an error in my system status. So what it's saying here is that the download client places the downloads in my user folder, but Radarr can't see it, and that's because it's running as a service. So it's just a permissions error, a little bit annoying. How do we fix it? So I'm going to press my Windows key and R, or you can search for run. I'm going to go to services.msc. This is going to bring up my services window. I'm going to scroll down to, there it is, Radarr. I'm going to click into it, and then in logon, it's trying to log in as a local service account. I don't want to do that. I want to log in as my account. So I'm just going to enter my name and PIN. I'm going to click OK. So it's been granted the right. So I need to stop and restart the service. So I'm going to right-click, stop, give it a moment to kill it. And then I'm going to right-click, start. And if I refresh, oh, I didn't even need to. You can see that the error's gone. So if you do experience some permissions errors, then that's all you need to do to fix them. You're basically telling the computer, don't log on as the local Windows service, log on directly as me. This might also come up with Sonarr, so I'll cover this again once we get to Sonarr. So let's add a movie. So if you've already got movies in that folder, you can click import and it will scan your folder that you've added. I don't, so I'm going to add a new movie. So just because I need something that's royalty free, I am going to look for George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. So there we are, the 1968 version. So this pings the movie database, so it should find pretty much anything. So I'm going to click into it, and you can see in here, it's going to create the folder inside my movies folder. I only want to monitor the movie. You can monitor movies and collections. That basically means that, for example, if you search for something we'll stick with the horror theme. If you get Nightmare on Elm Street and you add the whole collection, it will automatically go, we'll get you 1, 2, 3, 4, Freddy's Dead, Freddy vs. Jay, all the others, the less good ones. And then for quality profile, you can pick whichever one you like, depending on the profiles we set up earlier. Again, I'm just going to stick with any. And then if you wanted to start searching straight away, we're just going to leave that start search for missing movie enabled, and we're going to click add movie. Now, you'll see down here that it's starting to search. If we go over to SABnzbd and there you go, you can see it's grabbed it, it's downloaded it, it's going to take about a minute, and then we will have a look. So, see you in a minute. Okay, so that's downloaded. I just got my little notification down here that it's downloaded. You'll see that it's gone into my history tab, and what it's doing now, and that's gone. So what Radarr has done is it's downloaded the file, it's unpacked it, it's moved it. So if I go to my media library that I set up earlier, my media folder, and I go to my movies, there it is, Night of the Living Dead, 1968, and in that there is the film itself. If I just change my view there, you can see, as I set up with the naming convention, we've got the name of the film, the year, and then the quality. Obviously, if you remove the quality, which you can do, or you added something, that is what you'll see. So, nice and easy, very, very simple. You can, if it can't find the movie, or if you've set your profile qualities too low, for example, if you click into the movie, you can do what's called an interactive search. So this basically will scan your indexer. So you can see there's a 64 gig version. So thank God I didn't get that one. We'd be here all day. Or if you think 8 gig's probably a bit too big, I might see if there's any others. You can scroll down here and go, oh, there's a 4 gig one there. And then you'll get this little warning. So obviously it's basically telling me that you've already got a better version, so you don't need that one. But if you want to download it anyway, you can just click this little download icon. So that's that. So now let's move on to TV shows. So for TV shows, we're going to be using Sonarr, which is essentially the same app. Like I said earlier, the UI is pretty much the exact same. This just handles TV shows. So we're going to go to download. We're going to get our Windows installer. We'll open that up. So I'm not going to install this one as a service, just to test that permissions issue. Although if you don't install it as a service, you'll need to make sure that when you turn on your PC, you turn on the app as well. So there we are. So you might get some firewall issues. You can just allow it. And then here is Sonarr. So first thing we want to do, bookmark this, because otherwise you'll forget it. I forget it all the time. So we can see that the port for this one is 8989, which is just the default Sonarr port. For our authentication method, you can do the basic browser pop-up, which I don't really like, because if you can access these on your phone, by the way, provided you're on the local network. I've found that for the browser pop-ups, they're a bit unreliable and you can kind of lock yourself out. So just stick with the login page, disable authentication on local addresses, and then just pop in some login credentials. So I'll just put a PIN and a name in there. Okie dokie. So we're going to do pretty much the exact same thing. So if you want to test your own knowledge out, feel free to pause the video at this point, try and do this yourself, see how far you get. If not, carry on watching and we'll just go through it now. So firstly, we'll go to our system. We can see the same issues that we had a moment ago. So settings, download clients, add a new download client. We're still using SAB. We're going to need to go and get that API key. So in general, get the API key, and then back to Sonarr. There you go. Again, if you've got username and password, make sure you add them in there. Leave the category on TV and make sure that your download handling is completed. If you noticed before, when I downloaded the film, it automatically removed itself from the SAB queue. So I didn't have to go in and tidy it up myself manually. So now add your indexer. Obviously, I'll have to skip this bit, But log into your indexer, get your get your API key, and then pop it into there. There we go. Indexer's done. We check out our profiles. So the profiles are pretty much the same. So the only main difference is in the quality, it gives you the time as well. So it still works with the sliders and you can do advanced and do the bitrate. But if you see here, if I hover over there, you can see you've got a rough estimate of a 30-minute episode, a 45-minute episode, and a 60-minute episode. Obviously, if you've got shows that are longer than 60 minutes, you might have to slightly bump it up. It will automatically account for things that are longer than 60 minutes, so you might have to do some tweaking. Just for this sake, I'm just going to leave it as is. So now that's done, we're going to need to set our media management. So we're going to make sure that rename it episodes is enabled. I always advise having Radarr and Sonarr handle your renaming just to keep things nice and consistent. So make sure your replace illegal characters is on. It should be on by default. Leave that on smart replace. For your standard episode format, I don't like having the series title because it's in the series folder anyway. You can see there, you get a little preview. So if I delete that, it will adjust the preview, because I like having just the season and the episode number, the title, and then the quality. You've also got, if you have daily TV shows for like news-based programs, then you can have things like the air date. It will categorize them differently. And for anime, there is a separate way to handle that as well, because I do believe that anime episode numbering can be very, very... I'm not an anime fan, but from what I understand, anime episode ordering can be a little bit of a headache. So you can also have your series folder, so you can add the year if you want to. I tend to just leave it as is. You have your season folder format, so if you want, for example, season 1. So I'm just going to edit this slightly. So I like having padded season numbers, so that's having 2 digits. So to do that, I'm just going to add a colon and then 00, and you'll see that my season preview goes to a 2-digit number. You can also do a 3-digit number if you want, but that's insane. So your specials folder, sometimes people have these as season 0. I prefer just to leave them as specials, so you can leave them as is. And for multi-episode style, I tend to leave it as a prefixed range. So if you see like an episode of a sitcom that might have a double-length episode and it's treated as episode 1 and 2 in one, then it will call it episode 1 to 2 rather than have just one or the other. You can create the empty series folders if you wish. I don't tend to bother. You can also delete the empty series folders, which is handy. Obviously, if you delete a show, what this will do is it will clean up the folder after it. There's free space checks if you want to make sure you've got enough space before you start downloading. And then we're going to need to add our root folder at the bottom. So also I'm going to enable unmonitor deleted episodes. So these are all the advanced options, so you can just hide them. Anything in orange is advanced. So you don't have to do them, you can just leave them on the default. So I'm going to add the root folder, which I'm going to call C /media/TV. I'm going to OK that. And now I think we just need to add a series. Obviously, like I said earlier, if you've got TV shows in that folder already, click import, it'll scan through your folders and it'll go, we think we've matched them to these. Like I said, you might have to make sure that the naming conventions are accurate, otherwise it can struggle a little bit. So let's add a new series. So I'm going to think of something that I probably won't get demonetized for. I'm going to think of one of my all-time favourite sitcoms, and that is Bottom from Rick Mayall and Ed Evanson. So there we go, 1991. So I want to monitor all the episodes. So this can be quite handy if you want, for example, if you've watched a series and you're like, I watched the first series on Netflix, so I only want the new episodes, then you can just monitor the future episodes or ones that are missing. I just leave this on all. Or if you want to check out a series, but you don't want to waste all your bandwidth downloading the whole thing, you can just download the pilot episode, check it out, and then you can come back here and just change this if you'd rather. If, oh, it was a good show, I'll get the whole thing. Or it was terrible, I never want to speak about it again. So quality profile, again, pick which one you want. Series type, so this is where you'd say, right, is it standard, is it daily, is it anime? So obviously all mine are usually standard. And then create the season folder. So we'll start search for the missing episodes and we'll click add. So this will work exactly the same as Radarr, but rather than search for the whole series, it's going to search for individual episodes. So you can see there, it's downloading all the series. I've got a warning there. So that's basically saying that because I've enabled direct unpack, it's going to unpack it during post-processing, which does save time. But again, if you're on a low-powered machine, it can have a bit of an overhead. So you can see all these notifications popping up. So whilst these are downloading, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable those. So I'm going to go into my settings, go to notifications, and then we'll get rid of those. I'll probably keep the failed ones on just in case, but for finished, it doesn't need to keep pinging every 30 seconds. I've just turned it off. Stop doing it. It might be catching up. Yep, I think it's catching up. This is a nightmare. Come on. Right, there we are. So that's disabled the notifications. So you can see here, as it's processing the episodes and it's quick checking them and unpacking them and repairing them if they need to, it's going to be importing them. So if we head back over to Sonarr, go into this activity, we can see what it's currently doing. So you can see there's the episode titles. You can see the progress. And then if I refresh, we should see them start to disappear. Oh, there you go. So they're all in there. So if I head back over to series, you can see that. So the little red corner means that the series has ended, unfortunately. Green means that all the monitored episodes have been downloaded. If it is I think it's a yellow bar if it's missing episodes, or if you've unmonitored it, it's orange, or it's grey if it's not downloaded anything. So in here, I can see all the episodes. You can also, just as an extra feature before we look at actually viewing this media, if you click on calendar, if you are subscribed to TV shows that are currently airing, then you get this nice little calendar so you can see when the air dates are. So what Sonarr will do is it will only check those once the air date has occurred. For Radarr, it will keep checking regardless, depending on how you set it, just in case there's been an early leak or something like that. So now we've been able to get some movies, or our movie and our TV show. How do we actually host it on our local network so we can access it from our phones or tablets, TVs, whatever it might be? So there are a couple of ways of doing this. The way I'm going to show you is using an app called Jellyfin, which is an open source application. It's not the one I usually use. My preferred app is Plex. However, Plex does require, for certain features, an additional cost, additional license. I was lucky enough to get that license on a lifetime deal, so it was like £70 for lifetime support. Jellyfin is completely free. So I'll show you how to use Jellyfin. So here we are, we just go to the Jellyfin website and we just download it. So obviously this is for the Windows version. So we're going to need to make sure we get the correct installation file. And we'll give that setup a moment to pop up. There it is. Let's close some of these windows, tidy things up a little bit. So we'll just do a basic install. You can install it as a service, but it does say there it's not recommended unless you're accessing network folders. It's going to ask for the folder location. So I'm just going to leave it in the normal program files folder and then the server data folder there as well. So then we'll install that. So this isn't my actual media folder. This is just where it's going to install its own data. So this shouldn't take too long. There we go. So the way apps like Plex and Jellyfin work is they usually have two applications. You have your server application and your client application. Your server will be what actually hosts the media and your client will be what plays it. So let's open up the Jellyfin server. Now, I will say one of the disadvantages of using something like Jellyfin is availability. So the reason that I prefer to use Plex, and when I do more advanced guides, I'll be showing off Plex, is because availability. So my Plex server is used by not only myself, but it's also used by my family, who I don't live with, my girlfriend's family, who I don't live with, and a couple of friends. So they need access to it. So it's much easier, especially for those of an older generation. You can just get a Plex app off a smart TV, for example, or a PlayStation. I'm not aware at time of recording of there being anything for Jellyfin. There are apps, I believe, for iOS and Android, but for built-in smart tellies, Plex is always preferable, in my opinion. So, there's that. Ooh, that's not the right one. So if we see down here, I've got this little Jellyfin server active. So obviously, in order to access the media, you need to make sure this is turned on. So let's open this up. We'll close that. So this is my PC. So the server name, I'm just going to call Alex PC. Let's go next. So username and password, I'm just going to use a standard dummy pin for this. So now we can add our media library. So let's add a media library. The content type, first we'll do movies. So we'll call it movies, that's fine. Preferred download language will be English. Country region will be, in my case, UK. Prefer the embedded titles over file names. I tend to leave that on default. Disable different types of embedded subtitles. So some of the things you download might come with subtitles. Just to start with, just allow all. You can enable real-time monitoring. You can automatically add to a collection. So if, for example, if you've got, like I mentioned earlier, if you've got all the Nightmare on Elm Street films, rather than have 1, 2, 3, 4 in as several different entries, you'll have the Nightmare on Elm Street collection, and you click into that, and then it'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just a way to keep your libraries nice and organized. So I'm just going to tick that. You also have your metadata downloaders. So these arrows here, it's a preference. So highest is the higher priority. So the movie DB is been fine in my instances. You can automatically refresh data from the internet if you wish. So every 30 days is probably fine. Don't need to enable NFO. Again, image fetches, the movie database is fine. A lot of sites have things like fan art or alternative posters, but for me, the movie DB does everything it needs to. You can save the artwork into the media folders themselves if you wish. I prefer to keep it as part of the Jellyfin folder just to keep my media files nice and tidy, but that's entirely up to you. Trick play, I not actually used, so I won't be covering that. But a lot of these, they do explain what they are. I'll have to have a play around with these at some point. Oh, so it shows a preview. So when you're scrubbing through, it shows the little preview image. So you can do that if you like. Entirely up to you, but do be wary that anything like that will take up additional storage. And for the most part, if you're just going to press play, not really necessary. Oh, I forgot to add a folder. So there we go. So this little folders section, we'll press add, and we'll go to my media folder and my movies folder. So do make sure you're in the root movies folder. If I'm inside this, it will only scan that one film. But if I've got tons, then it's going to be a different story. So we'll click that, and then we'll click OK. So that's added movies. And now we're going to do the same exact thing, but for TV shows. So I don't know why it defaults to shows. I like calling it TV shows specifically. So we'll have the folder. Annoyingly, it doesn't default to the last folder I just had open. So if there's any Jellyfin developers out there, then there's a little hint for you. Do the same thing. It is open source, so if there are any developers watching this, then stick your pens in. We'll enable the library. Again, preferred language is English. Country region, we'll stick with the UK. Special series name, yeah, you can call it Specials or Season 0. I'm just going to leave it as Specials. I don't want the embedded names. And then, interestingly, they've not got... I normally use the TV DB for TV metadata, but they don't seem to have it. So we'll just leave it as is. And then automatically merge programs that spread across multiple folders. So I'm not aware of why you'd have something spread across multiple folders. And then again, we have those trick play images. So I'm just going to go OK. So that's those set up. So we hit next. So you can set your country region there. So you can configure remote access. I won't be covering that for this because it's a bit more advanced. So I'll leave it ticked, but I won't be covering it in detail. And we are done. So we'll click finish. I'm going to log in with my username and password. And there we are. Already you can see that I've got my movie. So I can click into this. It's got the different audio tracks in there. It's got some Portuguese subtitles, so I can change them to English if I wish. And I can hit play. And already, I think it's the Criterion version. How nice. You can see that, and look how quickly, obviously this is local, so it will be quick, but you can see just how fast I'm moving through. And the quality looks great. And the same if I go to my TV shows, then. So it looks like it's defaulted to season 3, which is a little weird. Oh, so that's because I went to recently added. So I can also go to TV shows and then go in this way. And then I have your next up. So if you're watching a series, it keeps track of which episode you're currently on. And then you can pick whichever episode you want to watch. And again, it's absolutely brilliant. So like I said, with Jellyfin, it's available primarily on your computer. So let's take another look at another way you can use Jellyfin. So for iOS and Android native apps that you can get on the App Store, the Google Play Store, they are primarily for remote servers, not for your local network. So in order to access it on your local network, the first thing we need to do is get the IP address of the computer that you're actually on. So this will be your local IP address. So in my case, I'm plugged into my router via Ethernet. You can do this over Wi-Fi. I'd always recommend Ethernet as it's infinitely faster. So all you need to do is if you go to your settings on your machine, you have to make sure this is on the machine where the Jellyfin server is active. And then if we go to network and internet, and then, like I just said, if I go to Ethernet, and then I'm looking for my IPv4 address, which is this one here. So there's my device address. So it will always start 192.168, and then it'll be usually .1 or .0, and then dot, and then the last couple of digits are that specific device. So that's the device I need. So I'm going to flip over to my iPhone, and I'm going to access my server from it. Okay, so I'm going to go to my browser, in which case I'm using Safari. This shouldn't matter which browser you're using, and if you want to access it on a laptop, on a tablet, the method is the same. So I'm going to go to my browser, and I'm going to input that IP address, so 192.168.1.50, and then I'll press colon, and the port is 8096, just the default Jellyfin port. I'm going to press enter. And there we go, we've connected to our server on our local network. So we're going to sign in. And there we are. So this is the simplest way to access it on your local network. What we can also do is I'm going to press these 3 buttons here. I'm going to share this. You can add it as a bookmark, or you can also add it to your home screen and then add it as a web app. So now I've done that, once I open it, it'll open in a nicer view. So annoyingly, it has kicked me out again. So I'm just gonna log back in. There we are. So if I want to continue watching bottom, I can just tap into it, tap it again, and a bit loud. And then it should also, when I rotate my phone, there we go. So it's quite an old show, so obviously it's in 4:3, but your movies will look a bit better on this. So, like I said, this works for your iPads, your Android tablets, whatever device it might be. So, this is one way you can access it. So, there we are. That was just a simple guide on how to set up a very, very basic media server to access your media throughout your home. So, If you like this video and it helped you out, I'd really appreciate a like and a subscribe. It really helps the channel. I will be doing videos that do more advanced setups for this kind of thing. I'll showcase things like automatic request apps and things like that, and just really showcase the power of what self-hosting your own media server can do. And you'll be the envy of all your friends and family, although they will start nagging you to download stuff for them, which I'll also cover in a separate video. So please leave a thumbs up, leave a comment if you need some help, join the Discord, send me some cash if you want, there's a Ko-Fi link below as well, and have a wonderful day.